This episode of the Necronama.com is brought to you by the Nightworms Book Club. Each month, Nightworms puts together a package of horror books, magazines, and other freebies and sends them directly to your door. With Nightworms, you'll receive at least 2 physical horror books and some original artwork. Any added extras on top of that will be unique enough that you'll actually enjoy having them. The fun doesn't stop there, though. If you use their hashtags and leave an honest review of any of the books included in the order, you can win additional items. Head on over to nightworms.com to learn more. I am James Sabata, author, screenwriter, and co-host of this show that you're listening to right now.
And I'm Don Guillory, author, historian, and of course co-host here with James. We are both lovers of horror. We love what they mean to us as far as our backgrounds, our upbringing, the social commentary that they involve. This week we are talking about the film Get Out from Jordan Peele in 2017. I'm going to be remiss if I don't do my shameless plug here, since we're talking about Get Out and racial issues within horror and being represented. I am also the author of The Token Black Guide. Hopefully you can go out and pick it up and laugh at my pain.
So I really wanted to do this episode as a double feature with Jordan Peele's work, going with Get Out and Us in the same episode. That was a terrible idea, and we knew it almost 10 seconds in. We have way too much to say about each of these. So part 1 today is going to be about Get Out, which is, of course, the story of a black man who goes to meet the parents of his white girlfriend, and things go really, really wrong, but for all new reasons compared to usual. And then next week we'll cover Us, which, if you don't know, is basically a story about a family that can't stop looking at themselves. Get Out is by far the more popular of the two, at least as far as people talking about it constantly. Why do you think that is?
I think a lot more people are familiar with Get Out, and of course, since we've had about 2 years since that film came out, as opposed to Us, where it's been about 5-6 months, and more is coming out about the film. There's a lot more appreciation about the symbolism, the analogies, all the stuff that gets brought forth in that film.
Well, and I think part of that is that Us is more of a straightforward horror flick. And so I think they lost some of the audience right there, because there's always going to be people that, I don't want to see a horror movie. Whereas Get Out kind of walks that line that Silence of the Lambs or other things like that walked, where it's horror, but it's socially acceptable horror. And there was so much hype with it that people had to see it.
Well, yeah, I mean, even starting with the preview for Get Out, I remember when the trailer dropped online, and a lot of people were basically saying, what the hell is it? Because it was very cryptic as far as that first trailer. You got a sense that it was going to be a horror film, but you didn't realize everything that was going to involve. And of course, we're going to talk about those issues today, and then of course we're going to talk about the issues that are brought up in Us. But it was remarkable that the reaction that it first got was, at least from a lot of people in social media, was very positive. And given the political issues that were going on in 2016 when the trailer came out, people at first thought that Jordan Peele was trying to take advantage of some type of racial division or whatever was going on. But this was a story that he had been planning for years. He just finally had the opportunity to publish and film it. Produce and film it. And when it premiered in February of 2017, people who went to go see it realized how much deeper it was than they originally thought, because of all the aspects about casual racism, overt racism, the value of the black body, a shared experience, asymmetrical experiences between black and white, just all the things that go into this idea of America's history with race, whether people want to acknowledge it or not, was brought forth in that film. in some ways in a very shocking and scary way, but in some ways almost a humorous way with the addition of people like Lil Rel Howery, and his role as Chris's best friend, and who's always serving this voice of reason to let him know, like, hey, things are not okay, man. You should be scared of all this stuff that's going on. And in fact, when we went to go see the film, his friend's experience, or at least his viewpoint on it, I'm sitting there in my head, I'm looking at all this stuff on the outside and remembering situations where I was that guy who was not looking at all the signs. And I've done that several times since this film, and every now and then I'm just like, damn it, I should know better than this. And even with the tropes that are out there within the horror films of the 70s and 80s about the black guy is going to be the first one to die, so don't expect him to live. That gets broken wide open with this film, because you find yourself cheering for this guy not just to survive, but to eventually get out, no pun intended, get out of this situation. And it forces you as a viewer, especially as a black male viewer, to look at it and say, like, where are the moments where I've kind of been that guy who felt too comfortable, or let someone slide, or just ignored all these signs that I wouldn't have ignored if I had been watching it from the outside.
Hey, quick question. Didn't you just go to a gun show in Mississippi?
Yes, that was research purposes. And it confirmed everything I had already thought, which was, I live in Mississippi currently. And, the great tagline I keep giving you is, you can't scare me, I live in Mississippi. Because going to a gun show in Mississippi, which I've gone to, gun shows in a couple other places, just out of curiosity, just to see the crowd, what's going on there. Yeah, it's a little different in the rural areas of Mississippi, because there is no, how do I put this? There's no shying away from certain aspects of American history and certain ties that people feel that they have to that history, which involved a lot of Confederate and neo-Confederate imagery, and not to my surprise, even some Nazi artifacts and paraphernalia was being presented and sold at this place. So as I was there, I have, as you and I have joked about before, I had this little voice, and it's basically Rod's voice in my ear saying, hey man, how does this not scare you? And
I think that was actually me on Facebook, literally asking you that question.
Probably. That's probably why I heard that voice. At least the film itself, it gives people who don't have close proximity to a black experience at least a little bit of understanding of that fear that people have, but they kind of keep bottled up because they're afraid that, if I express this, am I confirming, what's out there, or am I going to push somebody away? Because even the moment where Chris says at the beginning of the film, or near the beginning of the film, where he says, hey, I get a little nervous when there are too many white people around. Some people took that line as, oh man, it's so racist. I can't believe what he's referring to, and even what Jordan Peele is referring to, I guess, speak for him, but at least my experience from it, is he's talking about that experience of being by yourself and having no one who can recognize or sympathize or empathize with your experience, to where you're waiting for something bad to happen. Not that something will, or somebody's already done something, but you're waiting for someone forgets that you're in the room.
You have to be on guard. Yeah,
someone forgets you're in the room, and maybe the N-word gets thrown out, or someone assumes that you're the help, or they're nervous about any number of situations or issues, and they get into, hey man, I would have voted for Obama a third time, or they get into a sports discussion with you. Or one of my favorite real life examples that happened to me, I had an argument with someone at a sporting event back at Arizona State. I was going to watch the women's basketball team. Someone pulled me aside and said, hey man, I know you used to play here. And I quickly told him, like, no, I never played here. I didn't go to school here. I went to school back east. No, I remember you. You played here. I saw you play. So I got into roughly a 2-minute argument with a guy to let him know that I did not play football, basketball, any sport at that school. But he went away dejected because he's like, I know he played here. He just, he won't talk to me about it. He won't sign. Oh, he's being rude. I'm like, I did not play here. But that idea, when I told him, like, no, I'm actually a faculty member here, I teach, that could not be accepted because he could not pull this idea that I was there for academic pursuits or for academic reasons as opposed to athletic. And even with sports themselves, there's that discussion that athletes themselves, we talk about even getting deeper into what Chris's experience is, that idea that you are supposed to be the body, but you can't have that brain. You can't express yourself with respect to social or political issues. What you're supposed to do is shut up and play. And the most recent issue, I guess you could say, is with Colin Kaepernick. Going back a few decades, you had Mahmoud Abdul-Rauf playing for the Denver Nuggets, Muhammad Ali. Just the idea that eventually whatever it is that you're standing up for will be accepted, but it's not being accepted right now because you aren't the quote-unquote right person to speak out about it.
And I think that's incredibly powerful because it's weird how we pick who the right person is, but we do it in such a way that there's never a right answer. But let's bring this back to the trailer. One of the things that I find really interesting with the trailer is there was a lot more humor in it. It was very... What's that movie? Guess Who's Coming to Dinner?
Yes.
It was like that with some Little Rel humor and some other stuff. And it almost had that Scream vibe of this is a horror movie, but it's going to be fun. And I think that also enticed people to it. Whereas with Us, the trailer drops and it's pure horror.
Right. Well, and even with that idea, you've got that comparison with Guess Who's Coming to Dinner with Sidney Poitier, even in the idea of that film itself, to do a quick comparison. That film, when it came out, I think in '67, because it was around the same year as the Loving versus Virginia case, the film itself was seen as groundbreaking because of the relationship being discussed. But there's no kiss, there's no romantic interaction between Sidney Poitier and his soon-to-be wife, or soon-to-be wife. But in this film, they're in a romantic relationship, in a sexual relationship. They're there together, which has been kind of, America's long-standing racial taboo. Now, this idea of sexual miscegenation or race mixing or all this stuff that makes a lot of backwards thinking people a little bit uncomfortable is seeing that there is this positive relationship between a black male and a white female. The idea that America itself is being discussed as getting into this point of being post-racial because we've hit, in 2008, Senator Obama is elected or becomes president-elect. He takes over as president in January 2009. And there's this big discussion about us being in a post-racial America. But we start to see, as news stories come out, as all these different incidents come forward, you realize that it's not. And the film is reassuring in a couple of ways because, one, the film is being made. Chris is the protagonist, and you're not seeing any moment where Chris is kind of an aggressor. He's almost too timid in a lot of cases, which some people start to complain about. But it's not until that moment where he realizes I have an opportunity to get out of here and I'm going to kill everyone I can to get out of here that he's pushed in that corner and has to fight back. And what I saw, at least from the reaction from people who what I saw from the reaction from people who were leaving comments or having their reviews of the film was the part for them that was uncomfortable, was that Chris finally fights back, where what they wanted was he just escapes, he just gets away. From the film and from the discussion that you see that takes place in the film, all the issues, you realize he can't get out. He can't just simply leave. He has to fight back. There's some political undertones, there's some social undertones as well about this idea of you have to have some type of resistance. There was even one comparison I saw where Chris goes from being Martin Luther King at the beginning to being Malcolm X towards the end.
So we have the scene where they're on the bed, and he hits the first big thing that every person of color that's ever been in a relationship with a white person has had to ask. Do they know that I'm whatever?
Right.
Do they know I'm black? Do they know I'm Chinese? Whatever you want to put in there. But So tell me a little bit about that conversation.
Oh, with that conversation, you're right. That has taken place, I would say, within 99.9% of interracial relationships, primarily if it's a black male or a black female. I can't speak for the Latino and Hispanic experience or the Asian experience, but that is one that comes up because that has been kind of the most divisive one. But within the black community, I will say two things will happen. Your parents will ask about whoever you're seeing, male or female, and asking, oh, you're dating a white girl. Oh, do their parents? And they will give you warnings as far as what to look out for. Oh, just make sure you don't go to this place, or make sure you guys don't go out too late. That goes along with it. And the fear that Chris has is not just about her parents or Rose's parents knowing what his color is, what his background is. It's also this idea of safety and preservation. It's not an issue of, hey, are your parents cool, with us dating, for your sake. It's an issue of, if I show up, is there going to be a problem? And her reaction is very flippant, like, oh, my parents are really not like that. They're really cool. And he kind of gives her this look like, there is no such thing as my parents are already cool. They're going to want to know. And in a lot of cases, you have parents that you think are so liberal about or progressive about certain issues. You show up and immediately it turns into, wow, why didn't you tell me that Chris was black? Or why didn't you tell me that, this girl that you're dating is of this background? Because there is still, in a lot of cases, no matter how progressive, that idea of, I'm okay with us living together, working together, all these things, but, not dating my daughter. That's my baby.
And the liberal thing is kind of, I think that's the whole core of Get Out. I think some people who knew kind of what it was about went in thinking this family is going to be the typical stereotypical rich conservative blah 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 blah, and instead it's all the white people who feel so good about having cast a single vote for a black person. They've paid up completely. Clearly they love black people now because they went out of their way this one time to do something.
Hey man, Obama was reparations, didn't you hear?
Exactly. And what Rose actually says is so telling, because she says, my father would have voted for Obama a third time. That's how deep the love is. Like right there is this huge red flag that even she thinks that's totally, that's everything. Look at this. This is amazing. We would have cast our vote for a black man. Can you imagine?
Well,
and I think that's huge.
Well, her saying that, and then of course when her father says it upon meeting Chris, or talking with Chris, that's the equivalent to, I don't see color. It's that thing that's set up to kind of pacify you or worry, end any worries that you might have, but it really doesn't. It will make a person of color, and I'm speaking for all of us now, it will make us a little bit more cautious if you then say, hey man, don't worry about this, we're all cool, I don't see color. I don't trust you at that point.
Well, I don't see color is exactly the same as I don't see your problems.
Right. And that's what it comes down to. It's like, I don't see your identity. I don't see what you deal with on a daily basis. We've talked about this before, and even this idea within the film that scene before they even get to the house where the police officer pulls them over for hitting the deer. Comes and sees them after they hit the deer and has filling out the report. And he's asking Chris for his license, but he wasn't the one who was driving. Every black male who's watching that, to an extent, knows exactly what's going on. Whereas Rose, initially when you watch this, you see her as being clueless, like, oh, well, she doesn't get what's going on with the police officer. And Chris is saying this, hey, man, it's no problem. Here's my ID. Here's my license. Whereas she gets irate about it and then basically tells the cop, hey, this is wrong. You shouldn't be doing this. This is a violation of his freedoms. And goes forward, and the cop leaves. Later on in the film, you figure out it's part of her plan. I don't need anyone to know that he's been up here. I don't need any record of him being up here. But the idea that...
And I think that's such a great distraction. Yeah. Like, it really solidifies, oh, the white people are good, everybody. And but the more I thought about it, the weirder I think it is. Because I want to know where this happens at. Was this police officer, in the small town where this is happening? Is he aware of what's really going on? Or was this on the way and Rose's plan could have gotten messed up?
I saw it as it possibly getting messed up because even with all the people that are in that town, they are upper class. Whereas the police officer, I don't think he would have known anything about what was going on at the Armitage house because he wouldn't have been clued in. Because why would you want anybody else outside of your circle to know what's going on? You know, if they're not within that same socioeconomic background. Oh, even within that idea of model minority, the only non-white person that's there other than Chris and then Andre, who's obviously in the sunken place, is an Asian male, and yep. it feeds into that idea of, you know, even within groups of color, there is this hierarchy, this racialized hierarchy to where there's acceptable, and that's one of those things that it's changed over history. You know, I would give the person credit, but I can't remember their name. But there's this theory known as the path to whiteness, where there are certain groups that have been excluded, but depending on historical issues, social acceptance, you eventually get to that area. And especially with Japanese Americans in the United States, within the last 20, 30 years, they've gotten to that. I think Chinese Americans, it's been an issue within probably the last 15 to 20 years, as far as more integration within society. But that idea that you're not seen as an other, you know, your background is seen as more of an ethnicity as opposed to a race or a nationality, which of course allows him access, which is interesting because that whole moment where they're having that interaction on the patio where they're all talking and drinking and hanging out, and Chris is getting even more creeped out by the conversations that he's having, is really indicative to how marginalized communities feel that they're being talked about, but not being talked to. Or they're being heard, but they're not being listened to. And, you know, when he's having these conversations, or at least meeting people, they're introducing him, and, you know, there's almost this physical inspection of him, kind of like with the slave auctions. There's these odd conversations that people are having about him. And even to the point when he leaves the room, everyone's talking, but he goes upstairs, shuts the door, they all get quiet because they want to make sure that this game continues on and they don't lose another body. But you had a great point with respect to the art dealer and this idea of where Chris is going, at least the future plans for Chris.
Absolutely. It goes back to what we were saying earlier with I don't see color. So the art dealer is literally blind. I don't remember his name off the top of my head, and I should have had it open in front of me, and I don't, so I'm going to call him the art dealer the rest of the way. He is obsessed with selling art. Mm-hmm. He doesn't care about the value of it at all. Chris is a photographer who is known for his eye and how he pulls out these amazing photos. Immediately, the fact that the art dealer is going to be the one that ends up buying Chris builds this whole thing of the absolute disvalue of Chris's identity. Mm-hmm. Chris is a photographer, doesn't matter. He cares about his literal eye. He cares about you have eyes and I don't. It doesn't matter what your skin color is. So in some ways, the art dealer is worse to me than anyone else there. Because at least the Armitages are obsessed with black people being faster and stronger and whatever else. And they want your physical body because they believe that physically black people are superior. The art dealer literally doesn't care. He doesn't care about any other human. He would have taken anyone with this eye that he wants. And that became a physical representation to me of I don't see color. It's literally, I don't see any of your problems. I can't be as bad as them. I'm not racist because that doesn't matter to me. And somehow people seem to think that that's a good thing, whereas this literally shows that you're still not caring about other people. And I've always found that just the epitome of the movie to me. Like that moment is so much bigger than a lot of the movie to me, because it really sums up how much everybody thinks I'm above this. Right. And in some ways that makes you worse.
Well, yeah, it's definitely arguable that he's the worst villain, or I guess the best villain out of this, where, you know, the Armitages are the ones who are just kind of, I hate to give them any benefit of that. They're the ones that are serving as the vehicles to make all this possible. But it's also an issue of they wouldn't be doing it if people didn't want it. And the idea of, the art dealer coming in and saying those things about, the eyes themselves, or even that one line I'm going to paraphrase where he says, well, I couldn't care what color you were. It really doesn't make any difference to me. For him, it's kind of like, yeah, you're black. I'm going to overlook all that stuff, or at least any of the issues that are going on, because they're specifically choosing black people for this, as far as, especially when you see Rose's collection of photographs. They're specifically targeting black men and women. But for him, it's kind of like, yeah, I know this is kind of wrong, but I want to see, I need these eyes. And, it is a reflection of, American society blindness towards, racism, sexism, homophobia, all these other things that someone says that they're not participating in it. But by not participating, you are participating by default, because you're allowing it to happen. Even speaking out against it would be helpful. But the idea that now you're going to benefit from it makes it even worse. Yeah, I know it's bad, but this is kind of the world we live in, and I have the money to do this, so, get on the table and let's switch here. I'll work the controls. You get to sit back in the subconscious and see everything that's going on. But
well, and I think that that's actually part of, not to say anything nice about the Armitages, but they're doing it because they love their family so much. So they did the first ones to keep his parents. He literally says, when they died, I couldn't let them go. And the way the sentence is constructed, it's supposed to make you think he couldn't let go of the black people that worked there. But he actually means, when my parents died, I couldn't let them go. But he's doing it out of love for them. But then I believe, and I have nothing to back this up really, but I think that he starts selling it as a way to be able to afford to do it for himself and his family, or other people he cares about.
That's one way to do it. Maybe it was an issue, or because there's definitely a way that you could, or at least we want to see more of the background of why they did it, other than the cute video that
the coagula.
Yeah, that he gets to watch, or that Chris gets to watch before he's supposed to be put back under, about why they're doing it, and how the procedure works, and all this, this cool scientific stuff that's going on. But maybe part of it has to deal with this idea of immortality. And now you've got a chance to be immortal, and you just keep recycling these bodies, and basically, for lack of a better term, you're basically being a vampire, because you're now taking this person's life, or literally you're taking their life, in order to live beyond whatever your natural years would have been, or live a much better life than your body is allowing you to do, as far as the people that were suffering from physical ailments or any other types of health issues, which would make for a good comparison with Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter.
Really fast.
That's what it gets down to. It's all about this idea of slavery, or at least this new idea of slavery, and then being able to live off of these new bodies, whether you're feeding off of them or you are reconstructing these bodies to where you can now use them as a vehicle towards immortality.
Well, and when you look at the slave auction scene, you have the picture of Chris there, which is unnecessary because they all just met him. So this is so over the edge for me. like they've forgotten who he is in this little amount of time.
Well,
but I love that they hold
so.
up bingo cards. I love that they hold up the bingo cards. Like, bingo is such a elderly white person stereotype, and I think it's great that that's what they're holding up.
Well, and even with that picture, and maybe this was something that Jordan Peele did, because I loved the reactions that he had to people's tweets about it, where there were some things that were revealed that he didn't think about, or at least that took place that he didn't think about. And he kind of laughed about one when he's like, yeah, that's exactly what I was planning. My question is, with that scene, having that image there, having that portrait there, is this an idea of now we're going to memorialize, because it looked like a funeral scene. I mean, the chairs were all, because it didn't just look like an auction. It looked like a funeral scene because they've got this picture up there of him to where now his identity is gone. You know, Chris is not going to last past this weekend. He was a great guy. Yeah. It was great to meet him. Now let's pay homage or pay honor to who he was. And now you're going to bid on, you know, determining who he's going to become. Because, I mean, there was a lot of creepiness behind it, because I love the what ifs with these movies. What if Rose couldn't keep him distracted enough to where he walked back out there and says, "What the hell's my picture doing up here?"
Right? How weird would that be?
Just, and the time they took to frame it and everything.
I think that was Rose. I picture her with her hair pulled back in her bun, like later in the movie, just like dancing on her way to Walgreens to pick up a print, you know. But the other thing about it is that scene is so solemn. It's a silent auction, and everybody's just dead serious while they're doing it. And that also evokes that imagery of a funeral as well.
Yeah, you're killing him off. And maybe this is that idea of, this is how America will become, I guess, post-racial. You go ahead and eliminate, because they've obviously gone through a lot of people from what Rose has accumulated within that box.
And those people aren't there. There's what,
Andre's the only one, because I guess he's the newest one.
Or Logan, whatever you want to call him.
But this idea that maybe this is the idea of eliminating race, when I talked about that idea of path to whiteness, because Andre has lost all of his identity and he has actually become a white man. I mean, because there's a white man inside of him.
That's why he can't even fist bump.
Because when Chris walks up to him to give him the fist bump, Andre...
I guess Walter and Georgina are there as well.
Well, they don't count. Because they would... and nothing against that. They don't count because they're not participating... They're participating in the ruse. They're not participating in the auction, or at least this idea of, I used to be one of them. Because Georgina and Walter, they were brought in order to have the grandparents live on. So it's almost as if what the Armitages did was, hey, here are two people that Rose brought to us. They're going to be ours. We're going to keep them. As opposed to, you're bringing all these other people in, like most recently, I'm guessing most recently Andre. You're bringing him in to sell, to auction off. But yeah, as far as the scores of people that you see those pictures of, none of them are there. Maybe the couple doesn't need that body at that moment. And it really makes no sense for Andre to be there with his wife, or Logan to be there with his wife, because they're not there to purchase anybody.
I think they're there to show off. I think it's kind of advertising.
Oh, because he's new.
Like, look at this, and now my sex life is amazing because black guys are great in bed, as Don knows. And, like, you know, I think that's what it's there for.
Well, yeah, I guess it would be this idea of, similar to make the connection to slavery again, similar to showing off the slave that you just bought. Hey, you know, Rastus is a good slave. He's very obedient. He does all these great things. He can sing. He can dance. He can plow a field. All these great attributes that you can now advertise about the slave traders, and saying you're going to get your money's worth. So I guess it does have that purpose, or at least that historical connection there.
Well, it's also, I outbid all of you. I got this. You don't have it yet. You have to keep doing it.
Yeah, you're not part of the club yet. The thing I like, at least in this film, is the juxtaposition between Rod's idea of what's going on and then Chris's idea of what's going on, and the idea that Chris doesn't really figure it out until it's too late. Until it's hand me the keys, Rose. Until it's that scene where he realizes, oh shit, this whole thing has been set up as a trap. Well, the whole idea of that juxtaposition between Rod's character and Chris's character, and the idea that Rod knows something's going on from the beginning. For Chris, he's kind of like, oh, you're blowing it out of proportion. This doesn't make any sense. And it has to deal with that inside view versus the outside view. A lot of cases, in the case of Rod, it's that idea of looking out for his friend and knowing, something about this is bugging me. And he's basing off of historical issues, basing off of personal issues, basing off of, even current societal issues. Like, you don't go upstate by yourself with this girl and meet her parents, and they don't know they don't know your racial background. They should know this. Even after Chris has already had that conversation with Rose of saying, do they know? But once he gets there, Rod is having these conversations back and forth with him, and it almost becomes like Rod is Chris's. I don't want to say his conscience, but this other voice that he should be listening to, as opposed to the comfortable voices that are there. Because Chris, through the entire film, once he gets to Armitage's house, he's anxious the entire time. He feels that something's wrong, but he keeps getting these confirmations, or at least these false confirmations from Rose and her family that everything's all right. It's a little weird. I've never hung out with white people at their home, so this is probably what's going on. They have black people here, and that kind of makes me a little bit weird. But even when that happens, the father addresses it and says, hey, I know how it looks. White family, black servants, but it's not like that. And then he explains why they're there, and that's supposed to make Chris feel better. Hey, they work for my parents, and we just couldn't let them go. But yeah, that whole idea that when you're watching this film and you're getting Rod's perspective and getting Chris's perspective, you get a new glimpse of even the conversations that may be having with, maybe taking place between, especially black males and the friendships that are there, where it's kind of like, hey man, you should know better than this. You shouldn't be doing this. Don't go over to the house too late. Hey man, be careful, because if their parents know that you guys are going out, there'll be a shotgun. Or this idea that somehow she's going to be ruined if the two of you go out and you break up. It's not going to be a good thing, because no one's really going to want to date you, or you're going to be seen as the girl who dated the black guy, and then your friends are going to look down upon you. And what they really didn't have a chance to get into, which I would have loved. I don't remember any mention of, oh man, if you guys get married, you're going to have these beautiful kids, and getting into the idea of the tragic mulatto, and getting into the identity of that kid now trying to adjust to both worlds, and having that radar on for any of the issues that come up, or even the novelty that some people have about having children of mixed race, or even adopting children of different races than they are.
Well, they know that that's never going to happen, though. They know there's not going to be a wedding, so they're not even thinking in those terms.
No, I mean, just even mentioning it, because he mentions the Obama thing, but even trying to get you really comfortable and saying like, oh, you two are going to make some of the most beautiful children, because there's never any line like that. Which would have been another thing that would have been good to have been exposed, or at least included, because that's another one of those uncomfortable things that people mention, or at least state whenever they see, or I shouldn't say whenever, but more times than not gets mentioned with an interracial couple. You guys are going to make great babies.
So we have the hypnotism scene where the mom brings him in, basically accuses him of smoking, which he's supposed to take as, we care about your health, and they do, but not because it's him. And what I love about this scene is that they use a teacup. Tea is inherently always seen or portrayed as more of an upper class, sophisticated kind of drink. Having that teacup takes it to that next level. It's not in some random coffee mug or something like that. It's this really nice cup. She sends him to the sunken place, which is how we learn about that whole aspect. And I love that, number one, they literally push him down. There's no subtlety there at all. But I really love how tea in general has been the cause of so many changes throughout history. Like you look at like the Boston Tea Party, or the simple fact that Columbus was looking for tea trade routes. All of these things are major issues of the upper class being overthrown by someone else. And I kind of love how it becomes foreshadowing that Chris is going to somehow get out of this.
The idea of hypnosis, well, I'm gonna teach you and everyone who may be listening a very old African American saying, and I'm surprised that Rod's character didn't say this, but black people do not go under hypnosis, because that is quote unquote white people shit. that's jokingly known as white people shit, which doesn't mean anything disparaging towards white people. It's basically a way of saying, like, we don't do that. It's not us. You're not hypnotizing me. You're not doing any of this stuff. And even with Rod's character, when Chris tells him that he had been hypnotized, his response is, oh, man, get the fuck out of here. Because he's thinking to himself, like, that's white people stuff. Like, you black people don't do that. You're not, kind of these arbitrary rules that we kind of set up within society. It gives you a glimpse into kind of these black cultural patterns.
Well, and I think what's interesting about that scene for me is Chris says no. He says, no, I'm good.
Right.
And he tries to play it off, but then she just does it. So it's forced on him. So the next time that he's supposed to be hypnotized, he's in the chair at the end, strapped down. He's about to go through the experiment and become the art dealer. And so he knows this time what they're going to do. And that's when he starts digging in the chair, the hole in the chair, and he pulls out the cotton, which in and of itself is fantastic. And he takes the cotton and he gets it into his ears to stop the hypnotism. And that's how he wins. And I find that so great because the first time it's something he's unprepared for, but he immediately learns from it. It's never going to happen again.
And it's very reassuring too. I mean, it's a little creepy and from a historical perspective that he has to use cotton to save himself. Just, the history that exists there, within American society, whether we're talking about from slavery through Jim Crow, even up through the 1960s, that idea that this product that has been used against you or has been, responsible for your captivity is going to be the product that frees you.
And I love that inversion right there. That's the kind of stuff that Peele does that I think is just amazing.
You, man, I'm taking all the cotton out of my medical bottles and I'm keeping it with me at all times. Gonna keep them ready. But well, even the idea, we brought up the deer earlier as far as the car accident where they hit the deer, and of course they call the police to report it and everything. But what you have towards the end of the film is that kind of the continuation where you have deer being included again. Where Chris is walking through the house and takes the deer head itself and uses it to kill, I think the father, Dean,
yes,
to kill the father, and he uses, at least with the father, the deer that he uses, obviously for trophy purposes, it's a buck, and a buck itself. Historically, that was the term that was given to certain slaves who were resisting authority or did not conform well. The idea that a buck has now killed the guy who's responsible for all this is great. After picking cotton to save his life. Yes, I mean just that full inclusion of history on display that Jordan Peele has. Well, go ahead.
It's just kind of how the past influences everything. Because even when you look at the Armitages' house, the first time you see it, it's not a plantation, but it's got that feel of a plantation. And that's kind of, it carries over. This is our heritage. Mm-hmm. I couldn't resist that. And, just how the past still plays into today, even when you think that it's not. So the big turn, the big reveal, I think a lot of us saw this coming forever, that Rose is in on it. And so when she does the, babe, I can't give you the keys. It's such a powerful moment because I feel like it is symbolic of so much of white liberal America, of which I consider myself a part of, and how we're willing to help, as a generalization, not anyone in particular, but we're willing to help until we can't do that anymore. I can't go that far for you. And I think that is such an interesting embodiment of that notion. And Chris doesn't even he doesn't have the reaction I would have. Chris is just like
I knew it. I should have known better.
He knew this was coming the whole time.
Right.
And I feel like in his head, Rod was there I fucking told you.
Yeah, there should be another version where a bubble of Rod just appears. It's like, motherfucker. See?
And then you got Jeremy standing there with the lacrosse stick, which is such a white weapon. And I love that that's his weapon of choice. And then he gets taken out by a bocce ball. That's fantastic as well. So before we jump to the end, I just want to comment on my favorite scene. Because I love when Rose goes full psycho and she's sitting on her couch or her bed and she's got the Fruit Loops that she's eating dry so that they stay crunchy. And then she's got a glass of milk that she's drinking through a straw. And that's not even what does it for me, though, because as weird as that is, she's surrounded by teddy bears. And for me, it's whenever Rose became this person and started being used this way, she got stuck there. So in some ways, the Armitages gave up their daughter to save other people and don't even realize that they've done it. And then you have poor Rose, who doesn't even realize how she's helping them do this. Meanwhile, her brother's got this way more effective plan. So let's talk about Jeremy.
Jeremy abducts in a violent way. Rose abducts in a seductive way. Just the idea that they have to use her, or use her body, use her sexuality in order to get men and women, as opposed to using Jeremy's physical ability and violence is very telling as well, as far as, you know, where we sit even within American history. Because you look at, we can go and talk about Emmett Till. The idea that the woman who accused him was accusing him of, sexual harassment, which she later admitted that she lied about the whole incident and claiming that, he said he tried to come on to her or made some type of inappropriate remark. But the husband doesn't do anything on the same level as the wife. He goes to the violent option because that's the only route he can go to take out this 14-year-old boy. She takes him out with the use, or at least the threat of, some sexual impropriety.
I don't know why they're wasting time having Rose doing this if Jeremy can just grab people off the street. That seems way faster. So either A, I would like to see somebody point out like Jeremy's too rough and so he's screwing it up and so they have to go this other route. It would just be so time consuming. Like Rose isn't going to be young and hot forever. And they don't have anybody else lined up for this position. So to me, that's kind of strange. But as I'm thinking about it, I kind of wonder, why didn't they have more like Jeremy's collection, so to speak, like tied up and like bring them out as well or something like that? I think that could have been really interesting.
That would be an interesting thing to include. But Jeremy is, I guess the strength with Jeremy is he's supposed to be mysterious. He's supposed to be that, that mysterious, creepy white guy that something's not right with him. And, whether it happens to be he's got, bodies in the crawl space or a collection of someone's clothing or whatever trophies that he takes. You never get that indication. You get an idea that he's eventually involved because everybody else is involved. And especially when Chris goes into his car at the end and finds the helmet, which for Chris, it's not a big thing because he didn't see the helmet. As an audience member, when you see the helmet, you're like, oh, shit, he's been doing it all the time, too. Or, Jeremy's been doing it the whole time, too. But, by that, or Chris has already killed the majority of the family. So you understand, yeah, Jeremy's been part of this. And, of course, when he tries to run away or when Chris makes his attempt to flee, you get the understanding that Georgina and Walter are not who you think they are. They're actually the grandparents. But yeah, when he's leaving, Chris was trying to save her because he couldn't save his own mother. So I should try and save Georgina, not realizing who she was. Just kind of that he felt so compelled to save her. And especially at watching the film and then rewatching it, you understand that Georgina, at least the person who's inside of her, in the sunken place, is trying to reach out so many times and is fighting back. Whereas Walter, you don't see the person inside of him fighting back until he gets flashed. There is no fighting back from the men. It almost seems as though they're accepting it. Whereas Georgina's character, the person inside of her, is trying to fight back. And you have that moment where she's crying, as far as with the no scene where she starts crying and no. The moment where she stumbles while she's out pouring the drinks. And, all these moments where you kind of get an idea of she's been fighting back and trying to fight back to get out of the sunken place.
Well, I've always wondered how much of the grandma is like not cool with this, because there's a part of me that feels like maybe she's also feeling bad. Like she doesn't want to give up what she has, obviously, but like maybe she didn't choose this so much as it was kind of given to her. And so there's that part as well that I've always wondered about. But the thing that really got me watching this was Georgina's death scene, if you will, in the car. I was always like, man, but they killed the other person that's in there. But I guess there's no way to undo it. So
yeah, because even Walter, when he shoots Rose, spoiler alert, when he shoots Rose, he turns the gun on himself because he's like, there is no coming back from this.
Well, the only people that knew how to do the procedure are dead.
And even if he had come forward and said, hey, this is what's been going on, you know, we were kidnapped and they forced, it's not going to make any sense. And it's the whole idea that there is no way, at least, even with the film being called Get Out and this constant barrage of understanding that you need to get out of this situation, once you're sucked in, or at least once you're transplanted or you have that other person in you, there is no getting out. And so that's really why Walter kills himself at the end. I guess, to end that cycle after he's killed Rose. And yeah, like you said, there is no way that you can go and explain this to somebody and say, yeah, you know, these people, they were kidnapping us and turning us into mindless zombies that were inside of these bodies. Even to counter the what you brought up about the grandmother, I feel like the grandmother was a willing participant. Because when she does wake up after being hit by Chris in the car, she is pissed off about her house and is fighting Chris, viciously fighting him.
That's a really good point.
And the whole idea that you ruined my house is more important than, oh man, you probably killed my entire family.
But this could also be a factor of she was... Like, my point was, like, maybe she's giving them a little more access because she feels bad. But then when you get to this point, they've destroyed the thing that actually meant something to her. And that kind of goes back to that whole white liberal thing I was talking about, where we'll give a certain amount of space, and then at some point there's that, I can't do that.
Well, and even with that, as far as the political conditioning, that idea of Chris not getting the keys, you constantly have, and this was a discussion with the 2008 election, at least with the primaries, it was sexism versus racism. What was going to come out on top, or what was going to be defeated in 2008 was sexism going to prevent her, or was racism going to prevent him? And, a lot of people analyzed that, and afterwards they said, well, racism didn't prevent him, or he succeeded in spite of racism. And it started to create this idea of, a post-racial society. We're not in a post-sexist society. You're not in a post-glass ceiling society, but at least racism with respect to national office is gone. At least this was the theory by some people. But anyone who was following that election, especially in marginalized communities, whether you're black or Hispanic, you knew that wasn't the case. And even with the inauguration, there was still that fear of, oh, I hope nothing happens. Please don't let anything happen. The idea that you were scared as soon as he and his family got out of the car and walked. You were worried that something was going to happen. So that constant fear, at least that constant anxiety, is something that you're watching, or at least experiencing through this entire film, because you're sitting there thinking, what is going to happen at the end of this film? Because I watched Night of the Living Dead, and I saw a black male protagonist, survive through the whole film only to be shot at the end.
And we all thought that's where this was going. When Rose is laying there dying, everyone expected those red and blue lights to be a white cop, maybe even the same one from the beginning, and to pop Chris full of holes or to take him to jail.
In one of the interviews that Jordan Peele had, was the original ending was going to be him either getting shot or being hauled off to jail.
And they've released the alternate ending.
And that was his plan, but he realized with Black Lives Matter, with Trayvon Martin, with a lot of police-involved shootings, he was like, I can't do that. I can't do that. I can't have a story that is too close to reality. So at the ending, it's Rod coming in to save the day. So he breaks from a couple of tropes. So he breaks from the last female standing, because Rose is presumably dead at the end of the film, and 2, sacrificial Negro. So it's not going to be him trying to save somebody else, like the grandmother, and then realizing after he saved her, like, oh my gosh, she's actually one of them, and now I'm going to die. And there's no magical Negro either, because Rod wouldn't fit into that either. He's the friend coming to save his best friend. And no one would listen to him, including his friend. He went to the police. They wouldn't listen to him. He called all these other people. He was getting, no traction. Chris wasn't listening to him. So I have to take it into my own hands to save my friend. So you've got, this idea of not abandoning your friend, this understanding of racial animosity kind of bubbling up no matter how liberal or progressive somebody may seem on the outside. There's still that fear that something bad could happen, and if I'm going to prevent it, I'm going to do everything I can to prevent it. So he shows up. Now, Rod doesn't do anything other than pick up Chris.
Well, he cuts off Rose thinks that she has this final out, and he cuts that off. That's what he contributes right there.
I mean, as far as he gives her that disappointment or the dissatisfaction of, I'm raising my hand. Oh, I'm over here. I'm the helpful white victim of the horror film. Come help me. I'm going to be the last woman standing. He dashes those hopes for her because the look on her face is great when she realizes it's Rod. It's not just an oh shit. It's I'm not going to get away with this. That last little moment of hope that she would have had to survive all of this and then to have Chris go to jail or have Chris shot, gone.
Which is beautiful because Rod and this ending provide hope. I think that that's so powerful. As much as in the moment, the first time I saw it, I wanted the other ending. I completely disagree with that now. Jordan went with the right ending, and the amount of hope that he provides there is fantastic. And next week, when we're talking about Us, I'm going to say the exact opposite because he fucked up the ending, and I'll tell you why next week. But in this one, he gets it right, and it is so much more powerful than anything I wanted, and I love it.
Hey, you got the man an Oscar.
And the best celebration of all time through his buddy Key.
Yeah.
So, one more random knowledge drop before we leave here. For anyone who doesn't know, Jordan Peele decided he wanted to follow in Hitchcock's steps and have some blink and you'll miss them cameos in his movies. Hitchcock was famous for randomly being somewhere in one of the scenes. Jordan took it a step further, and he voiced dying animals in both films. In Get Out, when the deer gets hit at the beginning and it's laying on the ground, moaning and dying, that's Jordan Peele in the studio making those noises. And then in Us, when one of the rabbits die, we'll talk all about rabbits next week, when one of the rabbits dies, that's also Jordan Peele. And I think that's such an interesting thing to do, and I can't wait to see which animal he kills next.
All right, I am Don Guillory.
And I'm James Sabata. And next week, we're going to look at part 2 of our look at Jordan Peele's movies. We're going to discuss Us. I'll be here. Don will be here. 2 people who look exactly like us but are wearing all red will be here. And hopefully you'll be here as well.